In the cold lands where wheat falters and the soil turns thin and sour, one grain held its ground. Rye is the survivor of the cereal world, a plant that learned to live where almost nothing else would. While the great civilizations of the South built their bread upon wheat, the people of the North owed their daily loaf to this hardy, slender stalk that bent in the wind but rarely broke. Rye did not promise abundance. It promised endurance, and for millions of people across centuries that was enough. Its story begins not as a prized crop but as a weed. Wild rye once grew uninvited among fields of wheat and barley in the highlands of Anatolia and the Caucasus more than 4,000 years ago. Farmers cursed it, pulled it, and tried to keep it out. But as their fields crept north and climbed into colder, harsher country, something remarkable happened. The wheat struggled and the barley thinned, yet the weed thrived. In the poorest soils and the bitterest winters, rye outlasted the very crops it had once invaded. Slowly, the farmers stopped fighting it and began to sow it. The weed had become the harvest. By the early Middle Ages, rye had spread across the plains of northern and eastern Europe, into Germany, Poland, Russia, and the Scandinavian North. It asked little of the land. It could be planted in autumn, survive beneath a blanket of snow, and rise again with the spring. Its deep roots reached into sandy and acidic ground that defeated other grains. For the peasant farmer, rye was insurance against hunger. A field of wheat might fail in a cold year, but a field of rye would almost always give something back. The grain was ground into dark, dense bread that could keep for weeks. Black bread became the food of the common people, while the white loaves of wheat remained the privilege of the wealthy. Growing rye followed the rhythm of the seasons. Seeds were broadcast across plowed fields in the cooling days of late summer or early autumn. The young plants took root before the frost, surviving the winter as tough green shoots. When spring returned, the rye shot upward, often taller than a person, its slender heads nodding above the fields. By midsummer, the grain ripened to a pale gold, and the harvest began. For centuries, this was done by hand, with the sweep of the scythe and the bending of countless backs. The cut stalks were bound into sheaves, stood up to dry, and later threshed to free the grain. The long straw was never wasted. It thatched roofs, stuffed mattresses, and bedded down livestock through the winter. But rye carried a shadow as well as a gift. On its ripening heads a dark fungus sometimes grew, called ergot. When ground into flour and eaten, it brought madness, burning pain, and death. Whole villages fell ill in years of damp and poor harvest, struck by a sickness they could not explain. Some historians believe these poisonings lie behind ancient tales of bewitchment and visions. The grain that fed the north could, in a bad season, also haunt it. Yet rye endured, and so did the people who depended on it. As farming changed, rye changed with it. Horse-drawn reapers and then great machines replaced the scythe, and the dark bread that once meant poverty slowly became something else. Today, rye is valued for its flavor and its health, the heart of hearty loaves, crisp breads, and crackers across Europe. It feeds livestock, enriches soil as a cover crop, and is distilled into whiskey and vodka. Russia, Germany, and Poland remain among the largest growers, keeping the old grain alive in modern fields. Rye is no longer the desperate food of survival. It has become a choice, a taste, a tradition carried forward, and yet its deepest meaning remains unchanged. In the harshest corners of the world, where other crops gave up, the stubborn grain held on. It fed the hungry, sheltered the poor, and turned barren ground into bread. The grain that fed the north was never the grain of kings. It was the grain of the people who refused to starve, and in its quiet endurance lies one of the oldest stories of human survival.